If anyone is listening to this recording, please don't come to this tower. We're not alone.
The broken voice coming from the radio suddenly went silent. The screen went black.
3 days earlier, in Colorado's Rocky Mountain National Forest, the sun was just beginning to set. 24-year-old Jake Miller, an experienced fire watcher, pulled his Jeep to a stop. With him was his younger sister, Emma, a photography student who had come to capture the beauty of the forest. Their destination was Fire Watchtower 14. An 80-year-old wooden fire watchtower stood completely alone. It stood on the highest peak of the mountain. The locals always said, "Never stay in that tower after sunset." Jake just laughed.
Ghost stories are just there to scare tourists.
Emma smiled. "If I run into a ghost, I'll make sure to get its picture." Laughing together, they climbed to the top of the tower. By 7:42 p.m., Jake contacted the ranger station over the radio.
Only crackling static came from the other end. Then, a faint voice broke through.
Help us, Eve, before.
The signal suddenly cut out. Jake tried again, but there was no response. Emma thought a storm might be coming, but the sky was perfectly clear. No clouds, no wind, not even the birds were singing. The silence was so complete, they could hear every breath they took.
At 9:13 p.m., Emma was photographing the stars.
Then she noticed a strange light deep in the forest. First one, then two, then dozens. Emma asked, "Jake, are those people down there?" Jake raised his binoculars, and the look on his face changed instantly. They weren't people. Hundreds of glowing white lights hung perfectly still, floating about 2 meters above the ground. Then, every single light started moving toward them at once. Emma froze in panic. Emma whispered, "What are those things?" Jake slammed the tower door shut. Shut. "Turn off the lights."
The entire tower disappeared into darkness. Outside, the glowing white lights were now circling the tower.
There wasn't a single sound, only a strange, low hum echoing through the darkness. There wasn't a single sound, only a strange, low hum echoing through the darkness. It sounded like someone was whispering, almost too quietly to hear. At 11:58 p.m., suddenly, thud. Someone knocked from beneath the tower. Emma moved toward the window to look outside. Jake grabbed her hand. "Don't look, don't look." Then a voice came from below. "Jake." Emma froze in shock.
That's
Dad's voice.
But their father had died 5 years ago.
"Son, come downstairs. I'm here to take you home."
Jake's face went pale. Then he remembered. The old ranger had told him one thing before he arrived.
"If someone calls your name during the night, don't answer."
Jake covered Emma's mouth with his hand. The pounding from below grew louder and louder. Thud, thud. Then, the entire tower was hit by a violent jolt. It felt as if something below was trying to shake the entire tower.
Emma began to cry. Jake picked up his old rifle.
But then, footsteps began climbing wearing the staircase outside the tower. Thud, thud, thud. One step at a time, slowly, straight toward them. With every step, the old wooden staircase creaked louder and louder. Jake and Emma stared at the door without taking a single breath. The footsteps stopped, right outside.
Silence filled the entire tower once again. Emma looked at Jake with fear in her eyes.
Is it gone?
Jake slowly shook his head. No, it's still standing right outside. Suddenly, from the other side of the door, something began dragging its fingernails across the wood, slowly. Very slowly, as if something was measuring the thickness of the door. Emma's camera slipped from her hands. The sound echoed through the entire tower, and at that exact moment, scratching outside suddenly stopped. Silence filled the tower once again. Jake whispered, "Emma, don't move. It knows we're in here." Suddenly, the radio turned on by itself. A broken voice came through the radio.
If you're in Tower 14, don't go down before sunrise, no matter what you hear.
Then loud static filled the air, and the radio went silent. Emma wondered, who was that? Jake replied, "I don't know, but that voice may be the only thing keeping us alive."
Around 2 a.m., another sound came from outside. This time, it was someone crying.
Help! Please! Is anyone there?
Emma ran to the window. A little girl was standing below.
Her clothes were torn. She was crying.
Please, save me.
Emma said, "Jake, there's a little girl down there." Jake picked up the binoculars. Jake's heart began pounding. Through the binoculars, there was no little girl, only a tall, black, unnatural figure standing perfectly still. But the moment he lowered the binoculars, the crying little girl was there again. Jake realized, it wants us to come down. He pulled Emma away from the window. A few seconds later, the crying suddenly turned into laughter. Slow, terrifying. And it sounded nothing like a human. There were still 2 hours left until sunrise. Then, hundreds of footsteps began echoing from beneath the tower. It felt as if the entire forest had gathered around them. Jake carefully looked through a crack in the window. What he saw sent a chill through his entire body. Between the trees, dozens of black figures stood perfectly still. They had no eyes,
But every one of them was facing the tower. Then, all at once, they slowly raised their heads.
At that exact moment, the tower's foundation began to shake violently. The sound of cracking wood echoed through the darkness. Emma screamed.
Jake! The tower is going to collapse!
Jake looked around. There was only one way to survive: the roof.
On an old emergency shelf, there was a forgotten flare gun.
If he turned it on, maybe a rescue helicopter or a forest ranger would see the light from miles away.
They rushed onto the rooftop. Jake grabbed the flare gun, aimed at the sky, and pulled the trigger. Boom! A blazing red flare shot hundreds of feet into the sky. For a few seconds, the entire forest was bathed in crimson light. And in that crimson light, Jake and Emma saw their true forms for the very first time. They weren't human. Their arms were unnaturally long, their bodies looked like tree bark, and each one stood nearly 10 feet tall. But the most terrifying part, they weren't alone. The entire forest was filled with them. But before that, Jake and Emma had witnessed the most horrifying sight of their lives. The entire forest wasn't filled with hundreds. It was filled with thousands of black creatures. They were all staring at the tower. And then, in a single instant, every one of them disappeared. No sound, no movement. As if they had never been there at all. Emma whispered, trembling. Jake had no answer.
6:17 a.m. The sun had finally risen. Every terrifying sound from the forest looked completely normal again. The sound of birds had returned.
Jake let out a sigh of relief. Let's get out of here, now. The moment daylight arrived, they rushed down the stairs and ran straight toward their Jeep. But the Jeep was gone. The place where they had parked it. Only old rusted tires remained. As if the Jeep had been abandoned there many years ago. Emma's face turned pale. How is this possible? Jake didn't answer, because Jake had noticed something even stranger. A newspaper lay at their feet, and the date on it was October 17, 1986. They ran into the forest. They remembered the highway was only 3 miles away. But after walking for an hour, they found themselves standing in front of the same tower once again. But after walking for an hour, they were standing in front of the same tower again. Emma's breath caught. This can't be happening. Jake chose a different direction. They walked for 2 more hours, but once again, the same tower. For the 3rd time, the same tower. It felt as if the forest had no intention of letting them leave. Around noon, they found an old wooden cabin. The door was half open. Inside, everything was covered in dust, but one thing looked completely new. A diary lay on the table. Jake slowly opened it. The first page read, "If you're reading, you're trapped in Tower 14 too."
The diary was from 1987. It belonged to a fire watcher, Samuel Reed.
Jake quickly flipped through the pages. One passage read, "This forest is alive. It chooses people. The things you see at night aren't real, but anyone who sees them never comes back."
The next page read, "If you want to survive, reach the old mine beneath Tower 1414 before sunset. That's the only way out." There were only 2 hours left before sunset. Jake and Emma immediately ran toward the old mine.
But the deeper they went, the forest began to change. The trees grew taller, and the trails started to disappear. And then, they heard footsteps behind them.
It was the same sound, the one they had heard on the tower stairs that night.
Thump, thump, thump. The same sound, the one we heard on the stairs that night. Emma turned around and froze. A 10-foot-tall black creature was standing right behind us. Its eyes were completely white, and its face looked like it had been stitched together from many different human faces.
I grabbed Emma's hand.
Run!
We ran as fast as we possibly could.
Dozens of them were coming after us, through the trees, over the rocks, from every direction. And the sun was dropping fast. And then, we finally saw it. The entrance to the old mine. Emma and I jumped into the mine, and at that exact moment, the sun disappeared behind the horizon. Then thousands of screams echoed through the forest. The creatures stopped outside the mine. They couldn't come in. Deep inside the mine, we found an ancient iron door. Strange symbols were carved all over it.
I pushed the door open with all my strength. And behind it,
There was a tunnel, and at the end of it, daylight. We ran toward it without looking back. A few seconds later, we made it out the other side.
this wasn't the same forest. Right in front of us, there was a high...
Cars were driving by. Everything looked completely normal. Emma started crying with relief.
We made it.
I finally let out a breath of relief. A little while later, we reached a roadside gas station.
I looked at the gas station employee and wondered, "What's today's date?" The employee gave me a strange look. "Are you kidding me?"
I slowly shook my head. The employee answered, "July 23, 2026.
Emma and I looked at each other in disbelief. We had entered that forest only 2 days earlier.
But when we turned our phones back on, there were hundreds of missed calls waiting for us.
Then I saw a news headline: Colorado Fire Watch Tower 14 missing case, 12 years later. My blood ran cold. To the rest of the world, 12 years had passed. That night, Emma was asleep.
I walked into the bathroom and looked at my reflection. Everything seemed completely normal.
Then I saw it. In the mirror, a tall black shadow was standing right behind me. I turned around instantly, but there was no one there. When I looked back at the mirror, a message had appeared on the glass. "You never left." Was I still me, walked out of that forest wearing my face? You'll find out in the next chapter.